Bill Federer, I appreciate you being on my podcast. You are a longtime political observer, an author, a speaker, and there's some very important things going on, particularly with the Republican Party coming in the midterms. Tell me about them.
Right. Well, if the Republican Party lets up and does not go out and vote, uh, if just a couple congressional seats are flipped to Democrat, then they can vote in the Speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, and from what they've said, they will start impeachment trials immediately and have hearings, and it'll kneecap Trump's agenda, and this party can be over really quick. And all the great stuff that Trump is doing can end. And if they ever win the White House again, they won't let us up for air. These midterms are very, very important. It is not a time for conservatives to sit back. The other side is doing Cold War tactics. Basically, they create a crisis and want to blame the crisis on their political opponents so that their popularity drops. And this has happened time after time in Europe, and the countries would fall behind the Iron Curtain. They call it critical theory. They'd break the country into groups and pit them against each other, and they have riots, and then co-opt the media to blame the leader of the country for the riots. And when his popularity fell, they would do a coup or a rigged election and replace him with a Soviet puppet. And these tactics just got turned inward on the American population in 2015 with President Obama. And that's a whole nother story. But midterms are very, very important. And we can't take our foot off the pedal. And so the issues that we're looking at going into the midterms, what are the Democrat issues? Boys and girls sports. That's not a winning issue. So this looks really bad for the Democrats to champion boys and girls sports, and then transitioning children at the public schools to a different sex without the parents even knowing about it, and then wanting to arrest parents if they speak out at a school board meeting. That's not a winning issue, and the Democrats embrace that. So that's looking bad. But there's another
And of
issue
course,
that's
during
not
the
a winning.
Biden administration, it seemed like conservatives, which includes Christians, which includes most of my viewers, we felt like we were losing at every turn. Of course, this has been a trend going on for many years, and Donald Trump seems to have slowed it or reversed it both in 2016 and also in 2024. And there's a real momentum, at least I sense that. But you're right, conservatives tend to be passive and stay home for any number of reasons. And usually the party that's out of power in the White House or in Congress, which in this case is Democrats, usually pick up a whole bunch of seats in the midterms. There have been exceptions, and you're saying that this year there must be an exception.
Right. And so a losing issue is firing loyal conservative Christians simply because they hold traditional Christian views regarding marriage. That's not a winning issue. But yet we see an instance of this. And that's why I'm speaking out and feel that this needs to be addressed and fixed immediately, because we do not want Christians sitting home. And so in the current administration, there's an instance of a really good conservative Christian loyalist of Trump that got fired simply because he held traditional values, and his name's Floyd Brown. And so this is something that I don't think Trump knows about, because he's busy trying to stop World War III, trying to stop Los Angeles from burning down, and I think this is something that's happened amongst the staff that he doesn't know about. But I think it needs to be remedied before the midterms. That Floyd Brown has been loyal to Trump. I have personally, and you as well, seen him travel America prior to the election and working hard to get Christians off the pews and into the polling booth to vote. And sometimes there was some statements from Trump that were less than many wished regarding pro-life. And some of the Christians were saying, "Oh, I'm going to sit it out." And Floyd was like, "No, don't sit it out. We need to get out and vote." He's a loyal person. He's mobilized thousands, and for him to be fired from the Kennedy Center by Rick Grinnell simply because Floyd holds traditional values of marriage being a man and a woman, that's not right. And so uh, there are hundreds of good things that are happening. This is one that's not good, that needs to be addressed, and it can be addressed, and it needs to be addressed so that uh, we can go back to getting Christians to show up at the midterm elections. And
Well,
and
I'm proud of you to speak out about this. Let's talk about Floyd a little bit. He's somebody that both you and I know very well. You've known him a lot longer than I have. I know him as the founder of Western Journal, the former owner of Western Journal. He actually started his career back in the Reagan administration. Bring us up to date.
yeah, Floyd was the Charlie Kirk of 40 years ago, and big, tall like Charlie as well. But Floyd was the youngest hire that Ronald Reagan made, and he met with Reagan a dozen times. He was the Reagan administration's youth ambassador to other countries where they would go and have meetings and so forth. And then he ran the Reagan Ranch. And then he was involved with Newt Gingrich's Contract for America, just working really hard and seeing a lot of people get elected. And then after they get into DC, they sort of, water down their views. And then he was part of the Tea Party movement. And he spoke hundreds, probably thousands of times across the country, mobilizing conservatives and Christians and Republicans to get out and vote during the Tea Party movement. And then the MAGA movement. And out there writing, he even wrote a book, Counterpunch, right? That you published, powerful book, and would speak across the country. Here is somebody he's loyal to Trump. He's been fighting for conservative Republican views and values. But for him to be let go and fired from the Kennedy Center just because he holds traditional views on marriage, that's not a good thing. And it's unnecessary that we would inflict that on friendly fire, so to speak, because we need to send a clear message to keep Christians to come out and vote for Trump and the Trump supporting politicians in the midterms. So,
And the Kennedy Center has been a real mess. It's kind of a cultural icon. But lately it's just been woke, losing lots and lots of money. I've been reading about it and the infrastructure crumbling and drag queen shows and all that kind of thing. And Trump said he was going to get rid of that. I think he fired the whole board and he brought in Rick Grinnell, who's a respected diplomat, to kind of clean things up. And then Floyd was hired, and I think he was probably hired, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because of his loyalty. He has been such a strong backer of Trump at many different levels, very influential. And then 1 month after he was hired, something came to the surface from CNN. What was it?
it was a video of Floyd at a meeting, which I happen to have been at, where he's mobilizing Christians to get out and vote. And he is saying that he's explaining to them some of the DC dynamics of his 40 years of viewing it firsthand. And he says that Christians would vote for a candidate who would make all these promises, but then when they get to DC, somehow those promises would never get fulfilled. And he says that a lot of times it's the staffers. And he said that beginning with George W. Bush, more of the staffers were homosexual, and they didn't hold the views that the grassroots people had, particularly when it comes to social issues. And so he was saying these things, just explaining it, very matter of fact. There was no, vehemence or no. It was just saying this is how the game is played. But he says we need to,
No
if you
name
care,
calling.
no name calling, and he's never ever showed any biased or prejudice toward anybody of any sexual persuasion, which is ironic that he is so tolerant that they would be intolerant of him. Um, so this is something where he was just mobilizing people to get out and vote for Trump, and it worked. But I think that it's a bad message to send to the Christian conservative base when somebody who has been a loyal conservative Republican supporter for 40 years and is rewarded in a sense by this position at the Kennedy Center, but then to have CNN use this one little video and to get him immediately fired, no questions asked, and just gone and swept under the rug. It's like 40 years, and this is the way it ends up of his hard conservative championship and rallying people to vote for Trump. I think this is something that can be addressed and fixed. I think it should be addressed and fixed. And so I've been asking people to politely call Sergio Gore, who is in charge of hiring in the administration, and to ask him to reconsider the firing of Floyd Brown. Right? A polite phone call, Sergio Gore, and ask him to reconsider, because it's not a good message going into the midterms. Again, to have a 40-year loyal Republican person be let go because he holds traditional views. Matter of fact, these views are so traditional that Bill Clinton signed the DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act, in Defense of Marriage Act in 1996, defining marriage as one man and one woman. So Floyd, holding the same views as Bill Clinton held in 1996. In 2004, Obama was debating Alan Keyes for a Senate race in Illinois, and Obama said that he supported marriage as one man and one woman. That's in 2004. And then in 2004, Bush was campaigning, and he campaigned on marriage being a man and a woman. And then 2008, Hillary and Obama are at Saddleback Church, Pastor Rick Warren, and he asked the question on marriage, and Obama reaffirmed that he believed marriage was between a man and woman. It's sacred, it's above my pay grade, and all that kind of stuff. And Hillary Clinton even said that she was for marriage being a man and woman. That's 2008. And so these are views, and then we had that majority of Americans held. Matter of fact, at that time, there was not a Republican or Democrat, senator or congressman that was publicly for gay marriage. Right.
Well, it's not only just Americans in our generation, but going back centuries and millennia to time immemorial, all of society and family was based on a husband and wife having children and raising them. In every culture, every religion, as far as I know, no exceptions at all. And so this has been a very, very fast cultural change. Why do you think it happened so fast? And, anyone who reads the news know that the other side says that, you're on the wrong side of history and history is going in this direction. And that would explain why Hillary and Obama and others have flip-flopped on this issue. But what do you think?
Well, I did want to mention that the 2006 had a marriage amendment. It failed by 3 votes, McCain being one of them. But it failed not because they were in favor of gay marriage. They just said it should be a states' rights issue. And which makes it sort of interesting because Senator Rob Portman had the federal government want to acknowledge gay marriage. And it's like, wait a second, we thought it was a states issue. Why are you wanting to have the federal government step in? But to show how mainstream Floyd Brown's views are, the largest Protestant denomination in America, the Southern Baptist Convention, June 11th, 2025. All the delegates voted to have a ban on same-sex marriage within their denomination and agreed that marriage should be between a man and a woman. So he's holding views that a whole lot of re- conservative Christian voters hold. And so again, it is not a good issue going into the midterms to have somebody holding traditional views that I would say the majority of the country holds, to have him be fired simply for holding these views. So I asked people, make a polite phone call to Sergio Gore in the White House and ask him to reconsider the firing of Floyd Brown. This is not right to reward such a good conservative Christian man who's been loyal for 40 years by being let go and swept under
So
the rug.
before we go on, I want you to articulate more carefully, including spelling the name, so people find the phone number. In fact, we'll put it on the screen. The number for the White House. And how do you spell Sergio Gore's name?
Yeah, it's Sergio, Sergio, and then Gore, like Al Gore, but you leave off the E. So Gor, Gor. And he's in charge of hiring 4,000 people in the administration. And he has a reputation of getting along with everybody, but that's would make it sort of strange that he would allow a really good Trump supporter to be fired again for holding traditional views. And
Well,
and
there
the
are a lot of
importance-
Christian values. In fact, most Christian values are not necessarily um, backed or adhered to by non-Christians. You could go right down the line, starting with lying and cheating and all those kinds of things. But even with sexual things, there'd be a lot of Christians who believe that the Bible says that sex should just be between a husband and wife, and people should wait until marriage even to have sex. Okay, most Americans probably don't agree with that. There is a difference of opinion, but someone's not going to be fired for saying, I believe that you should wait till marriage to have sex. It almost seems like there's something different about the gay rights type of agenda. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, it's actually the first homosexual organization in America was 1950. It was the Mattachine Society, and it was formed by communists. And their goal was, we can't defeat America from the outside. It needs to be dismantled from the inside. So 1963, Congressman Albert Herlong read into the congressional record 45 tactics that the Soviets were going to use to try to weaken America from the inside. And it was infiltrate the schools and push propaganda to the students. It was infiltrate the media, infiltrate the churches, replace revealed religion with social justice religion. They pretty well succeeded in many areas there. But it was also to dismantle the family and to push sexual promiscuity. Why? To weaken the country from the inside, because they wanted to defeat it. It was sort of like the Cloward-Piven strategy. Richard Cloward, Francis Piven, Columbia University professors who were socialists, and they lived during FDR's time. And they said, well, the socialists aren't going to conquer America with tanks, but if you can destabilize the economy and get everybody on welfare, then they'll incrementally give up their freedoms to the government in exchange for their welfare check to continue, and you can backdoor the country into socialism. But it was this period where it says, look, we can't defeat America on the battlefield. We have to rot the apple from within. And so the pushing of sexual promiscuity is part of that. And it's not random. A study was done by J.D. Unwin, Unwin, excuse me, in Oxford. He's an anthropologist. He wrote a book in 1934 called Sex and Culture. And he studied 80 major civilizations over a 5,000-year period of recorded history. Babylonians, Assyrians, the Greeks, the Romans, and he saw trends. And one of the trends he observed was that sexual promiscuity always precedes the collapse of a civilization. He said that civilizations go through 4 stages. The first is a period of pain and poverty, war, famine. They make it through and they work hard and they get productive. And then they work together and they become patriotic. And then they finally achieve prosperity. And then they want to enjoy their prosperity and they get pleasure focused and promiscuous and weakened, and they get conquered by the next rising civilization. and it just keeps going. J.D. Unwin even refers to it as a sexual marketplace. He said, when women as a group say nothing happens unless there's a commitment, the guys make the commitment, go out, work hard to be productive, and bring the money home to their wife, and then little kids appear. And the guy has another emotion of being protective. And when the majority of the men of the country are being productive and protective of their wives and families, the whole country gets productive and protective, and rising water floats all boats. And they become stronger, and they become innovative and creative and expansionistic and even militaristic. But when the women as a group say there does not need to be a commitment, he says water seeks its own level, and guys will get pleasure focused and sensual and promiscuous, and they'll be more into their own fulfillments sexually, and there'll be fewer kids born to fill the ranks of the military. And the kids that are born to fatherless homes are going to be undisciplined, and it's going to weaken the country, and then they can get conquered by the next rising civilization. He said it's irreversible. Why? Because once a nation goes down this hill, human nature wants the pleasure. And so once you remove the dam and the dike and the levee and the water's let out, you can't really put it back in. Now, in ancient Israel's case, they lasted a little longer because they had a big magnet in the sky called God, and you were accountable to God. So they would periodically have revivals. But even Israel fell, right? Solomon had 1,000 wives, and but you look back at the Greeks. Plato talked about that democracy would only work as long as the people had virtue. But he says people really don't have virtue, because if you give them a choice of giving up their life or giving up their virtue, they'll always give up their virtue to save their life. And he said if somebody was born who truly had virtue, the world would crucify him. Plato wrote that in 380 BC. Isn't that interesting? But anyway, how could you? He says that by Plato's time, Greece had a bunch of fickle deities, gods that needed to be appeased. And there wasn't a God of the Bible that had an absolute right and absolute wrong. I mean, how are you going to be accountable to the goddess of love, Aphrodite, when her temple has temple prostitutes, right? And so these civilizations, once they yielded to promiscuity, they were on the road to being weakened and eventually conquered. There's a quote from John Adams to Thomas Jefferson in 1816, I think. He said, have you ever had one instance in history where a nation that had given up its virtue has returned? He said, no effort in favor of virtue. Can you tell me how to prevent luxury from producing effeminacy? This is John Adams writing this, that the luxury, the prosperity produces this promiscuity. And so J.D. Unwin brings out, he says that it even goes to premarital sex. He says the cultures that say that nothing happens, right, until there's the marriage commitment. He goes, those are the ones that became the strongest, that lasted the longest. But when that began to erode away, then it was an eroding of the entire morals internally of the country. And so this is not me talking. This is Oxford anthropologist J.D. Unwin writing his book, Sex and Culture, 1934. I refer to it in a book that I wrote called Socialism, The Real History from Plato to the Present. If anybody wants it, AmericanMinute.com is my website. But you can go on YouTube and type in J.D. Unwin, and you'll pull up lots and lots of videos of explaining this trend. It's a real trend. And so America has been in the midst of this. And so you have people saying, we want to make America great again. We want to keep America strong. And it includes these values. But again, their traditional values, the Southern Baptist Convention, June 11th, 2025, reaffirmed their belief that marriage should be a man and a woman. And these are views held throughout history. And in a sense, I did a Valentine's Day message. I was amazed. A large percentage of birds are monogamous. That's right. Birds like swans and bald eagles and penguins, one mate for life. I thought, isn't that interesting? And that's where Shakespeare's Parliament of the Fowls. And so on Valentine's Day is when the birds gather. And so that's where you begin to get associated with courtship and marital love. It's a fascinating presentation, but this idea
Well,
in
you're
nature.
certainly knowledgeable about a lot of things. And before we're done, I want you to tell us again how people can get in touch with you. And what you're saying really rings true. You know, all of us have seen this erosion that you've articulated going back even to the 1950s and 60s. Yet it seems to me that with the rise of Donald Trump, who nobody thought could win the presidency, but he has, and then he came back again. Now, you know, that's a topic for another day. It seems like we've had some kind of reprieve. But you're saying that if the midterms go the opposite direction, all that ends. As we wrap this up, what do you think the trend is going to be? Is it inevitable that America just disintegrates and some other nation, which, you know, is going to be something like China or some other evildoer? Do you think, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. One of my books, it's called Who is the King in America? But I go through 6,000 years of world history from the beginning of the invention of writing, Sumerian cuneiform on clay tablets in the Mesopotamian Valley. And the most common form of government in world history is kings. Nimrod, Pharaoh, Caesar, Kaiser, Sultan, Tsar. And a king is a glorified gang leader. So the default setting for human government is gangs. And Josephus, the Jewish commentator, said Nimrod wanted to build his tower so high that if God destroyed the world again with a flood, he could survive on top. And he made everybody in town bake bricks and bring them, or he would kill them. And so, in a sense, Nimrod was the first globalist, because the civilization started in the Mesopotamia, Fertile Crescent area between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, just down the mountain from Mount Ararat. And so, since the civilization of the world is there, Nimrod wanted to control. In a sense, he was the first globalist. God comes down, confuses the languages. The people scatter into language groups that turn into nations. Lo and behold, nations were God's invention to postpone a one world government. But
we have 30 seconds. So tell
anyway,
my viewers how they can find out more information about Bill Federer.
Yeah, my website's AmericanMinute.com. But America is this nation that does not want a king. Trump is not a king. If he was, he wouldn't let judges stop him. He wouldn't have so much trouble getting a bill through Congress, right? He wants to strip the government of power and get rid of the Department of Education. He's, in a sense, America's last chance. And in a sense, the world's last chance, because if America goes, you're going to have a gang war between Russia and China and Ayatollah and North Korea. And so America is holding that back, and Trump is holding America to be great again. We need to win the midterms.
Thank you for watching the Strang Report. I know that you're concerned, as I am, when someone like Floyd Brown gets fired. So I'm going to make the calls like Bill Federer said to Sergio Gore. Look on your screen to get the information, write it down, make a phone call. Even a dozen or 20 phone calls will make a difference, because people in Washington calculate that when they get a call, that represents about 100 people. Thank you for watching. God bless you.